Good morning, everybody. It's Module 3, and you have made it almost halfway through the course. So by the time you get to the end of this week, you'll be halfway through, and that probably feels pretty fast because indeed it is. Let me share our where we're at here so we can kind of move forward. Let's start with everything here. Okay. Module 3, here we go. Again, if you need the actual details of when things are due date-wise, you can go up to syllabus and schedule over here on the toolbar. Modules over here, of course, mean weeks, so you probably figured that out by now. I don't know why they're not called weeks, but they aren't. Here's our overview for this week. Again, we have lots of things due, and again, I have some suggestions on actually when you should do them as opposed to when they're actually due. So let's take a look at your activities and assessments. Okay, so again, as always, you should be starting today, if not yesterday. The first thing you should probably do, even though it's down here at the bottom, is the listening to this and then doing the tech live reflection. If you do have any technical issues, please let me know via email. I will try and always provide the links to not only the video. Again, you can find the video by going over here to the Tech Live and Office Hours and then looking for the reporting section. I usually try and provide also a YouTube link and also all of the links that I discuss in the video separately in an announcement, just in case there's any issues with technology. Sometimes there are, sometimes I don't know them ahead of time. Sometimes when you're live, there's actually stuff. Sometimes it's your computer. It's technology, right? So we have these things. So I just want to make sure that you know that they're all available there. Okay. So, but again, do that tech live reflection. Do that today. Do that tomorrow. All right. Get it off your chest. Get it off your list of things to do. You also then have a discussion. And those discussion, the initial posts are due by Thursday. It tells you that the peer posts are due by Saturday. Of course, I always recommend that you do the video today, the reflection today or tomorrow. The reading then is the next thing that you have to do. Get all those reading things done. We have short stories this week, and they're kind of cool short stories, so I hope you enjoy them. And then the short stories will inform you about your discussion post on Thursday. So again, choose 2 of the assigned short stories. You'll read 4, you'll choose 2, and then you'll compare and contrast their plots and conflicts. We'll talk a little bit more about what that means. What is the plot, which is of course the conflict, right? If you have no conflict, then you have no story. Conflict can be all kinds of different things. We've talked about it before a little bit. Conflict can be person to person. It can be person to an animal. Right? There can definitely be conflict there. If you've ever tried to train a dog, there can be conflict with technology. Sometimes that happens in this class, right? There can be technology. There can be person to nature conflict, like a tornado or a flood. There can be conflict within myself. So sometimes it's me versus me, where I have doubts about something. Lots of different conflict. But if there is no conflict, there is no plot, right? So compare or contrast the plots. Number 2, compare and contrast the characterizations, right? Are the characters flat characters? Do they stay the same? Do they have some sort of an arc where they are dynamic and they change their opinions or their thoughts or their morals or whatever? Compare and contrast, or contrast. Notice it says or. So comparing is they're similar, contrasting is they're different. So comparing or contrasting, it depends on the 2 you choose. The setting, especially if there's something about a setting or a change in the setting that impacts a particular character. For example, you have a 16-year-old boy or 17-year-old boy back in World War II. They live at home on a farm, and then they're drafted off to World War II. That setting can make a huge change in the way the character interacts with whatever's happening, right? Okay. Well, it could be a female too, even in World War II. Maybe they were a nurse or they left home to become a worker in a factory. Who knows, right? So the 4th one, compare or contrast the use of symbols or figurative language in the play. And that one's always slightly the most difficult one here for people because they just get a little bit freaked out about what symbols are. We talked a lot about symbols and figurative language last week. It can be all kinds of different things that mean separate things, right? Okay, so that's your first thing to do by Thursday. And then I completely and utterly beg you, suggest that you do the peer review comments that you have to do, which, by the way, that's down here, and they give you some instructions on how to do it, what you're going to be doing based on theirs. So make sure you read that and do those 3 bullet points there. Do that by Friday, right? If you wait until Saturday, not only do they have your peers not have the benefit of your analysis of what they posted, but you don't have the benefit of reading their thoughts and going, oh, wow, that's interesting. I didn't know about that. So do that by Friday, at least. Okay, so post your initial by Thursday, read the posts of your peers by Friday, and then by Saturday, you're doing the next thing, which is this. You're actually going to write a comparative short story analysis this week. So you are going to choose a paper. Okay, so you're going to write a paper that compares or contrasts 2 short stories. So there's 4 that they give you that you read. 2 of them you'll pick because you like it, because you hate them, because they're vivid, whatever it is. It doesn't matter which ones you pick. And then you're going to be focusing on the theme of initiation to something. It could be a growing up story where I suddenly realize I'm not a child anymore. It could be me being initiated into a particular idea. It could be me being initiated into a group. It could be all kinds of things, but thinking about the theme of initiation somehow with these particular 2 short stories. Again, you'll be comparing or contrasting the plot, the characterization, the setting, the symbols. So of course, the discussion board is going to really help you in this regard because you'll be ready then to write the paper itself. You're going to be analyzing all of these things. Make sure you read through all of these different instructions. They give you some really good tips, such as a sample thesis statement, for example. When the young narrator in James Joyce's short story, Araby, suddenly realizes blank, the main, right, so what do they realize? When you're reading through the short story and you get to the end of Araby, suddenly it just sort of stops and you go, wait, what just happened here? What did that character realize at that point? Okay. Then the main character in Alice Munro's Boys and Girls slowly understands blank, right? And by the way, there's not one answer here. There's multiple different ways. And in fact, each time I read these short stories, I see something different. So like, don't be afraid to think about it from various different viewpoints and go, what are they realizing here? Is it this? Is it that? Why is it this? Why is it that? Don't be afraid to go out into the internet and look and see what other people thought. Don't be afraid to listen to your peers and go, oh, some of those things are going to really resonate with you, and you're going to be like, now I get it. Okay, we will look at a couple of videos in regards to this as well. Okay, now, big thing I wanted to hit on this one, you're analyzing. You are not summarizing, right? So the bulk of this essay should not be you summarizing the story. You will be assuming that we as an audience have read the story. You will be citing from the 2 short stories. You'll be including quotes and examples, but you will not be summarizing it. Okay, be sure that you do that. Again, there is a rubric provided. That rubric is not necessarily for me so much as for you. I want you to take a look at that rubric, at the criteria and the points allotted there before you turn it. So look at the rubric, write the paper. Before you turn it in, look back at this rubric and go, did I do these things? Do I have a thesis that's debatable, clear, and able to be proven? Do I compare and contrast 2 different stories? Do I differentiate between those two short stories? Do I talk about the plot and conflict? Do I talk about the characterization? Do I talk about the setting? Do I talk about the symbols? Do I have a conclusion that revisits this, right? Do I have a professional paper that has few errors? By the way, do not forget that you can go back over here to the student resources section there, right? The student resources section, as I mentioned before, does have a link to the tutor. You can turn your paper into the tutor by the middle of the week, right? And get some feedback back on it. If you're having trouble with spelling or grammar or whatever, turn it into the tutor. Get some feedback, okay? All right, so these are the things that you have to do. You can kind of see where your schedule should come from through the week. Sit down and make yourself a little bit of a schedule so you know what you're doing. And let's then go back to Module 3. Let's take a look at the learning resources. Notice there's a lesson. The lesson's pretty short this week, but it does kind of walk you through, and I'm not going to do everything here, but I want to point out it kind of helps you with clarifying literary themes. That's something that a lot of you have trouble with. And then it also has a section on initiation, which, as I just mentioned, your paper there is going to be talking about initiation into something. So what does that mean? Here is some help that comes from the textbook, and they're going to point out where you're going to be thinking. So make sure that you take a look at that too. All right, the short stories are here. A and P. That's if you're older like me, you remember A and P stores. Boys and Girls by Alice Munro, Araby, and The Lesson. So we have enough time today to hit a couple of those, and we're going to take a look here at some videos. So let's look at A and P. Now, I've tried to get a variety of different short essay or short videos for you in a variety of different ways. Some of them are real people. Some of them are the actual authors reading. Some of them are cartoons, just because I want to get a wide variety of ways in which you might see something. If you do not like this particular video, but you like the short story A and P, there are lots of other resources out there. Do not neglect taking a look at that. So here we go. Let's take a look at A and P.
Just to get our bearings before we set off, let's quickly recap the events of this short story. We open on a fairly typical local grocery store, where the usual routine has been interrupted by three young women coming into the shop in nothing but their bathing suits. The narrator sizes up each one individually until he becomes fixated on one in particular. He determines that this girl, with her bathing suit straps pushed down over her shoulders, must be the leader of the group, and he decides to call her Queenie. As the girls shop and the boys at checkout ogle them, other shoppers are apparently flustered by this inappropriate display, which only delights the staff all the more. Once they've made their selection, a can of herring snacks, they enter the narrator's checkout line as his manager, Lengel, comes on the scene. He reprimands the girls in front of other customers and insists that they be more properly dressed next time. Taking this as offensively embarrassing to the young ladies, the narrator quits his job, only to be disappointed with the final outcome. If you were born in or after the mid-1990s, you might find some of what we're about to talk about a little outside your time frame. For instance, one of the important elements of the setting in Updike's short story is the time period it takes place in. First published in 1961, the events of A and P occur at the height of the Cold War, a period between the late 1940s and early 1990s of extreme tension but no large-scale offensive between the Soviet Union, the US, and their allies. For almost 50 years, the two sides closely monitored and critiqued one another, breeding paranoia and distrust among both populations. In the US, fear of the Soviet or communist way of life's corrupting the American dream led many to even begin turning on neighbors if they demonstrated ideas or behaviors they saw as anti-American. Of course, since its name is the short story's title, the local A&P of a sleepy New England town north of Boston is also rather important. This chain of grocery stores, also known as the Great Atlantic and Pacific, or A&P Tea Company, has actually been a long-standing institution in the American Northeast.
I'm pausing just for a second because if you haven't yet read the short story, you probably want to pause your video and go read it. It's a very short story. This video is going to make a whole lot more sense if you've read it, right? So you want to interact with the reading in your own head, then the videos, reading again, right? You want to encounter the reading actually twice. The videos are not intended to take the place of the reading, but to enhance your thought process on them.
Originally established in 1859 as a trading company, A&P eventually grew into one of the largest commercial entities in the U.S. at the time John Updike was writing his story. The A&P, which still operates.
Okay, so that's a quick part of that video. We're gonna go back over here to find you guys. Okay, so again, I don't want to take too much of things. I don't want to show you too much. I want to give you little bits and pieces of what we're talking about. All right, so that's A and P. Let's take a look at the next one, which is Araby. And Araby, I have to tell you, when I first read Araby as a teenager in high school, I think, I did not like it. And I think that was because I didn't understand it. The language is vivid. The place is wonderfully vivid. It's foreign. It's over in Europe. But now that I've read it a couple of times and it makes sense to me, I really love the story. So don't necessarily assume that you're going to love it or not love it based on your first reading. Okay, so let's go.
Efficiently, which makes accomplishing your work goals easier.
All right, in today's video, we're going to be looking at Araby by James Joyce. I did that just for you. One of the most famous postmodernist writers, James Joyce. Many people fear him due to Finnegan's Wake and Ulysses. We're going to talk today about Dubliners may be the place for you to start. Welcome to the Codex Cantina. I am Una.
And I had my joke stolen by you. I'm your Irish crypto.
You're going to do the accent.
I'm going to do the accent for the whole video.
So published in 1914, I believe originally in Dubliners, not the Dubliners as I typically want to do. You can read this for free. We're going to put a link in the description down below if you want to read along with us. But this piece, oh my gosh, is such a great place to start. Because I feel like many of these stories, it's just so easy for the reader to just put themselves into that position. All of these stories, a lot of them I should say, just resonate with me. So I really like this collection of stories. And Araby is one of my favorite pieces, not just in this book, but of all time.
I love Arby's sandwich.
So first of all, Crypto.
Yes.
This story is about your love life, is it not?
As a young lad, I longed after a lass. Her name, we'll keep that a secret.
My bro sister.
But I feel like this is me at 11. I was in 5th grade and I pined for her from afar. I wrote her love letters.
This reminds me, I actually brought this book specifically to show it off here. I read this book a long time called The Sorrows of Young Werther from Goethe. I was told that this was just like one of the greatest infatuation stories. I think Araby does it better than this. That if you enjoyed this book, I would really recommend checking out this work because it's very, very accessible. So first of all, do you know what Araby is?
Yes, so this is a place, not a person. And since the whole story revolves around people, it's very interesting that the title is not the love interest's name, but it's the place, and that's going to have huge implications.
That's a really interesting clue. If you decide to choose Araby as one of your short stories, setting is important.
At the end of the story. So I don't want to give away more than that just yet.
Now, did you know the Araby Bazaar is real? Like in the 1890s, there really was an Arabic bazaar where they had tons of merchants and bright colors and things going on. Like this is based on a real event.
Yeah, a real place. Yeah.
Before we get into this, one of the things that I really like about this is just the structure that Joyce uses this, and in many of the things in Dubliners, like just offhand, the story right before this, I believe, is an encounter. It's always about like kind of like that hero's journey where the boy has like this goal, right? Like here he's got this girl that he wants. And an encounter, it's kind of like the freedom, the ability to do what you want, away from school. So they think they have this goal, in this case the girl, in that case the freedom, playing hooky from school and escaping. And the way Joyce just kind of realizes that you had the right ambition, but the wrong goal post. The goal post in Araby was going to the bazaar to buy something, and we learned that was potentially the wrong goal post. We'll get more into that. And an encounter, you thought it was playing hooky, and when you meet the dude on the street, like you realize, oh, I screwed up. I need to get back in school. But it's all kind of like that young boy coming of age, hero's journey, where the goalpost doesn't line up exactly with what your goal is. And I love the structure that he uses to achieve that.
All right, so let's get into the plot real quick. It's a very short story. You can read it quick. You can listen to it quick. but it's a love story, and a young boy falls in love for the very first time to a girl, and he wants to buy her something to impress her, and he becomes a little obsessed with it, of going to the market, which is a bazaar, which is called Araby's, and when he gets there, it's funnier.
I can't stop thinking of Arby's now. I blame you.
I know, delicious roast beef sandwiches is what he's buying for her with Arby's sauce, and at the end of the
Definitely sarcasm there. It's not Arby's.
story, he comes to an epiphany that he is not getting the girl. But this one's all about your characters, and there is very few characters, and they're very simple, but in that simplicity, it is so good.
All right, so let's jump into what we think's going on here. Now, you and I haven't really touched base on beforehand what to do. We have some friends out there. Alan from Big Hard Books and Classics actually hosted a read-along of Dubliners before you and I started doing the YouTube thing. It would have been really cool to join that. But him and Brian from Bookish both put up some videos where they did a really good job of kind of comparing the author's life, particularly with where he grew up and some class structure things. So I don't want to repeat that. I will instead put a link down to their channels and potentially their videos down below.
But Grammarly's premium confident tone suggestions ensure that I come across as confident, capable, and sure. It helps.
Would encourage anyone that's interested in Araby to check out their version as well. So what I want to do is I want to look at this with a different lens than maybe some other people have looked at it. And what I did is I said, I'm not happy with my conclusion of this story unless...
Notice he says, I'm going to look at it with a different lens than other people. And that means, of course, that there are lots of different interpretations. And so you may not agree with him, and you may be looking at other sources that may not either. That's okay.
I include both the symbols of how light is used in the story and the fact that he keeps bringing up religion. I need both of those in my answers to be happy with how I interpret this. So that's how I looked at that. Is that a fair start?
Yeah, I'm really excited to hear your viewpoints on the religious aspect, because we always somehow bring that up. But I also want to know if you saw the huge contrast of the light and the dark.
Yes,
how
sir.
those relate to the characters as well, because that's the driving force of the story. And we've seen that in writing before too. I think this time it's done even better yet.
Okay, so yes, I did pick up on those, and I believe I've tied them together for my theory. Obviously, there's a lot of different interpretations out there. Don't be, if you've got a different interpretation, go with it.
Yeah.
Let me try and sell you on mine right
All
now.
right.
You ready for this?
I'm ready.
All right, so the opening. I'm going to give you some lines from the opening. An uninhabited house, detached from its neighbors. Other houses of the street, conscious of decent lives within them, gazed at one another with brown, imperturbable faces. So our neighbor is immediately set up as being detached. Okay? Right? He's separate from the other houses that are aware of lively forces within them. The boy lives with the aunt and the uncle. He doesn't live with the mom and the dad, which I think is something you see very common in Disney plot lines, with the idea that by breaking your parental lineage awareness, it focuses a character to look internal at their identity a lot more.
At a lot younger age too. Yeah.
At a lot, typically, right? That it's just a common device.
Yeah.
Air musty from having been closed. And this is where they're talking about the priest who has passed away. Right outside the Catholic church, or Catholic boys' school that was let out, that was noisy when it was closed. So we've got some closure symbology from a religious life perspective as well as a school perspective as well, right? And also they talk about the papers on the ground. Papers being representative of a book. You know, when you think about reading a book, that's a solitary activity in a detached house. So we've got a lot of symbols of being detached, alone. We've got a lot of symbols of religious stuff coming to an end so far. And you'll notice also that there's a lot of talk about darkness here, that the boy was in a dark room, that the whole area was dark. There's tons of references. Here's my favorite part of this story. The wild garden behind the house contained a central apple tree and a few straggling bushes. My friend Crypto, do you know what fruit a solitary apple tree bears?
An apple?
Nope. Bears nothing. In order to make this fruit, there must be 2 of them within, I think, like the general recommendation is 100 feet. But the idea is you can't have a solitary. It says central here, but I'm taking that to represent it's by itself, because you had the house by itself. You got the boy off by itself, being raised by the aunt and uncle. There's a lot of discussions of isolation here. And here, why bring up this apple tree and make it a central tree and it having straggling shrubs about it? So I've got a lot of isolation comments here, right?
Yeah.
And I got a lot of comments about the priest passing on, about the church school closing.
Okay, keep going.
So he meets the girl. I've got this quote. I had never spoken to her except for a few casual words, and yet her name was like a summons to all my foolish blood.
I love that line.
I love that line,
Yeah.
right? So he's foolish. Now, you can take this a couple different ways. You can take this as the coming of age of blood rushes to certain areas when you get excited when you see a girl, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now, here's another thing. When did the girl come to him, and how?
Yeah, so at this time, we see that her name just sprang into his head when he was praying.
That's right. When he was praying.
Which is, like you probably want to point out, solitary, right?
Mm-hmm.
Praying, you do something by yourself.
Oh, the books that he had. I got to bring this up just for the sake of it being complete. But we got one of the books is religious, one of the books is about a boy, and one of the books is a detective piece. So going back to my point earlier, this is a story about a boy, right?
Mm-hmm.
We got a lot of religious symbology in here,
Yes.
and we got a detective piece. I don't know if that was on purpose, but I feel like that's really inviting us to dig deep on this part of the story.
All right, so kind of a meta little nod to say, hey, you should check this out like a detective would. Okay.
Okay, so what is so that quote we just said, I had never spoken to her except for a few casual words. He doesn't really know her that well, does he?
No, he doesn't know her really at all.
And when you were a young boy and you finally got to talk to that girl, you were really excited, weren't you?
Nervous as heck.
She starts talking about this market. Oh, the market. Oh. What did she say about not being able to go to the market? Why couldn't she go?
Well, this is super important to the story because she has to go to the convent.
I'm glad you picked up on it. Perfect, because I remember there's some people that didn't pick up on that, and that seems really important to me.
That's super important because the boy doesn't pick up on it.
And
And as a reader, if you don't, you'll hate the end of the story, and you'll be angry, just like the very last line of the story. The boy is angry because he missed this piece. That's crucial. It might be the most important line in the whole story.
This gives our hero a purpose.
Yeah.
This also is a purpose he can't achieve. If she truly is going to a convent, we must assume
She's going to be a nun.
We assume she assumes she's going to be a
Yeah.
nun, right? Which means her life is dedicated to
God.
And this little boy, we've had no connections for him with God so far, right?
Right. It's everybody around him.
And at this point, she's wearing white, right? She's got a lot of purity around her, and there's a lot of references I think you talked about earlier about the light here. So the boy's in the darkness, and I don't think that means evil. I think that means isolation. And she's purity. She's white. She's got this light, the white bracelet she was twisting around in her arm or her hands when she was talking to him. She's the one that's supposed to be having a relationship with God.
Yeah, and I think that obviously is great symbolism. The imagery of the light for her. So to quote, light falls from a lamp, falls on her, white curves of her neck, her hair lights up, lit up the hand upon the railing. Her dress has a white border. There's all of this light or white imagery when it comes to her. So.
Right. But so what?
Yeah.
Why? So he's so excited to go to this Araby, right? His uncle comes home. There's reference. They use the word pious at this point in time. And I think it's the aunt says, I'm afraid you may put off your bazaar for this night of our Lord. Okay. So what's going on with light and all this religious symbology here? The boy's anxious to go. His uncle returns, gives him money. There's a reference to two things here. The Arab's farewell to his steed, which is a very famous story about a man saying goodbye to the steed, like his main piece. And then you also have him say, all work and no play makes Jack a dull boy, which is a very old idiom about you can't be too obsessed or too into one thing. You have to take time for yourself. So here the boy is going to have to say goodbye to something. And he's going to have to say goodbye to something he's also obsessing about too at this point in time too, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we're seeing the dad bring in these connections about saying goodbye to something at this point in time. Okay, our turning point. He goes to the market, right?
Yep.
This is when he suddenly forgets why he came there. He is pining over this girl. There's no way he just forgets why he came there. And it's the moment when he sees the woman, he sees, hey, things are closing down. This place doesn't seem as glamorous as I thought it would be. But when he sees the woman talking with two men, he sees the socialization, the connection between these other people. All of a sudden, he starts to realize he doesn't have something here, right? He is in the darkness at this point in time. And he says, I recognized a silence like that which pervades a church after a service. Okay, here we go again. Now he's back in the darkness, right? And we're talking about a church service. So we're coming back again to this light and this dark and this religious symbology. And I remember it being in class, and there's a lot of people talking about why the hesitancy. And some said, well, it could just be that he realized he didn't have enough time to buy what he wanted. It could be that he realized he didn't know what she wanted. But the problem is those theories, for me, don't tie in the darkness, the lightness, and all this religious talk.
Agreed.
That's been going on throughout this whole piece. I can't agree with those. You're welcome to believe them. I can't agree to them because it's incomplete with everything else that's been given to us, right?
Yeah, I think that there's a lot more to it than just that.
So the last line, gazing up into the darkness, I saw myself as a creature driven and derided by vanity, and my eyes burned with anguish and anger. All right, so let me turn this over to you. First of all, where are you at this point in time? Like, what did you think going through this? Like, what connections did you make, or what did you pull from the story at this point?
So at this point, I'm kind of reeling because the epiphany for the kid at the end is that he's made a mistake and he's just realizing it now. And he realizes when he looks up into the darkness. And that's the complete opposite of the girl, which we saw light. And then I was a little bit frustrated because you wanted more, right? This was averting expectations again, like we've seen so many times in stories. But then hopefully the goal is that you have an epiphany yourself, self-reflecting of that we've all kind of gone through this story, or many young men go through this story of pining over your first love and then realizing the problems with obsessing over one thing.
I think, and then to combine both the lightness and the darkness and the religious symbology at this point.
Yes.
He is isolated and he's always in the dark. The light that he sees when he sees this Mengen's sister, the unnamed infatuation, if you right? She has her relationship with God, in theory, as a nun, that he will never be able to connect with. He won't have that relationship. I think what I took from this is speaking to the toils of a young boy coming of age from a sexuality standpoint, where I'm going to take it the opposite way that I think you might think I might be going with this.
Okay.
You see this combination of a boy having to make a choice at this point in time of wanting to be with this girl and whatnot, right? Mm-hmm. But I think this is actually kind of a commentary on religion, where I almost feel like he's rejecting and almost making a commentary on when you include God in this picture, it greatly complicates things that you can't have, right? The girl is giving up her life to God in terms of a relationship with God that he can't encroach upon. And this whole time, he's been chasing that. He's been chasing the light. But I think he lacks that religious step that he realizes that the love that he wants, he can't have because religion is coming in the way of it.
Or I think to also add on that, you could also say that the avenue that he's going about it is wrong. And the two key words there, derided and vanity at the end, can support that he's doing this for vain reasons, self-serving reasons, unlike the girl.
Yeah, his vanity mocks and derides him.
Yeah.
That's a very specific statement about
himself
while
looking in the darkness.
This is a struggle internal to him, nothing to do with what I say the word relationship with her, but he's barely spoken any words to her. This is an infatuation. This is not even a relationship. This is him wanting something that he realizes he can never have. And there's the complications in the way that keep him from having it. And only now is he, I think, facing the way when he enters into this bazaar where it's dark and like silent, like a church after service. After God has moved on, after the closure of the priest, after the closure of the Catholic school, the closing of shutting off God, that's only when he starts to finally realize this moment of realization of, oh my God, I'm doing everything wrong.
Yeah. But I don't think it's actually a negative thing. I mean, I know we might be coming across kind of negative, but I think that the end result is that this is a closure to a period of his life where he is a child now becoming a young tween, or whatever we call him nowadays, where he's hit puberty and understanding really how relationships work.
I agree. This is a very sad coming of age story, which for why I love it so much, must say that I'm a very lonely person or something. I don't know why.
No,
kind of
you have
there.
Family, friends.
All right, so this month we have been looking for the greatest.
Okay, so I think you guys get the feel. This is called the Codex Cantina. These guys, from the Codex Cantina here, these guys do all kinds of analysis of short stories, so you may want to look them up for other short stories as well. But I wanted to give you that link to kind of give you a little bit more about that. Now, another one that's very different. Let's see if we can find the right one here. Hold on here. I think we found it. Okay, here is. Oh, I did lose it, didn't I? I'll pause for just a minute. I'll look it up again. You know, technology, right? Okay. Let's go back over here to see what we're going to do. Well, that's why we're doing this. We're getting this confused. No wonder. I'm going to pull back up our lesson things. Remembering again, and this will probably make more sense to you now that you've seen a couple of those videos, remembering that the focus here is initiation. What is someone, young, old, initiated into, right? All right, so we've taken a look at A and P. We've taken a look at Araby. We're going to take a look at boys and girls. Although I lost the video. We'll find it. And since we just did that and I'm in the Codex Cantina, I was going to give you a different thing, but I'm going to go into the Codex Cantina again because I think they just do a really great job. So again, you may want to take a couple of notes as you're listening to this. This is about 14 minutes, not quite as long as the last one. And we're going to talk through boys and girls short story. So give me
It is okay to be so stressed and overwhelmed that you feel like you need to talk to someone about it. And by that, I mean going.
A story from 1964 talking about the divide as well as using this level of symbolism. Let's talk about what it all means today. Coming up.
Boys and girls. There's got to be a song, right? Boys and girls we can use.
Something like that.
I'm Crypto.
And I am Una, and if you guys are new here, welcome. We talk about literature in a conversational way, so let's have some fun today. First question I have for you, Mr. Crypto. We are doing Boys and Girls by Alice Munro. That's what we read, right?
Yes.
All right, so the first question is, who is our narrator?
So our narrator is Flora, and she is an 11-year-old girl, and she is going through the journey of life.
Notice that there's a theme here, right? You may be seeing the themes between all four of them eventually. This one's an 11-year-old girl. The last one in Araby was an 11-year-old boy or 13-year-old boy, right? Initiation.
And she's realizing as she's going through her journey that there's all these gender stereotypes and norms that are being placed on her. And it kind of breaks her heart a little bit because she doesn't realize that that's how life is supposed to go. And she's questioning things of why is it happening this way?
That's a great summary, but Flora was the horse. I don't think that's the main character. The main characters is no, that's the horse's name. Flora is a young 11-year-old girl that's not named.
Yeah, because that's important to her brother's name later. Dang it, I don't know why I associated. Well, I mean, that is the female horse, right? Oh, I'm a terrible person.
All right, let's go through what
It's
happened.
the slaughter of her identity. That's what it is when they kill the horse.
Let's go through kind of like a plot recap. Let's make sure we're on the same page here, and then let's kind of talk some more about the analysis here.
Or even on the same story, because obviously I'm not.
So on a farm, our narrator grows up and tells us the story of how her father was a fox pelter, where he'd raise young foxes, kill them, and cut off their fur for profit. Now, Henry Bailey, a hired hand, even teased her with dead foxes. The kids were frequently afraid of night, but not of the outside, of the inside, and made up stories and sang songs to help distract them. As the narrator and her brother grew up, they'd take care of the pen, mow the grass, and even feed the foxes horse meat to help out. The narrator much preferred these tasks to helping her mother in the kitchen. One day, her father introduces her as the new hired hand, and she was so proud, even though the salesman thought of her as only just a girl, until he learned of this news. Her mother continues to make comments that she looks forward to Laird, the brother, growing up to be of real help, and the narrator would help her mother more in the kitchen. One day, they got a pair of horses to feed the foxes, Flora and Mac, each with their own personality. The narrator never saw where they shot the horses, nor knew how to do such things as shoot a gun. So Laird and the narrator decide to sneak in and watch the horses be shot this time. The narrator was shaken slightly, but covered it up as they went off to see if any new kittens had been born in the barn. As the narrator grows up, she begins combing her hair and wondering if she'll be pretty when she grows up. One day, Flora the horse gets away from Henry, and the narrator has a chance at stopping her. But she doesn't, even though she knows the horse will be caught. The father is told what the narrator had done, but dismisses her as she's just a foolish little girl. And the narrator wonders if he is right. Shocking that this was written in 1964. I gotta say, it's very forward for 1964.
Very forward thinking. I think that Alice was trying to really hammer home a point here of, do we have to believe that these are the stereotypes that are put on us, especially maybe sometimes by our parents, not just society.
And to be fair, I mean, when this came out, much more of a conversational, shocking piece than it is today. Today, it's like an accepted fact that, I guess many cultures are working towards that. Do we have to have these pressures put on our kids and our children to behave certain ways, to fulfill certain roles? And we're approaching kind of a society where we're promoting people to pursue their own happiness, pursue their own personality, rather than necessarily what society says, this is the role for you because of your gender, per se.
I love this story because I think it's still very relevant today in some regards of people placing those traditional gender stereotypes on individuals. And we see that very clearly in this story in many regards, but I think it's still a very relevant conversation.
So the story starts out with the narrator and her brother sharing rooms, which I think there's a lot of symbolism in the story. I don't know how you feel. I thought we'd walk through some of them today. But when it comes to kids, right, we grow up. I don't know how you and your sister grew up. I shared a room with one of my sisters, right? The oldest sister, I had two sisters. The oldest one got her own room, right, because she was of age. But the middle sister and I, the two youngest, we shared a room for a long time. And I think this kind of speaks to how there's not that divide or that privacy or that difference in gender at this point in time as they're growing up. And even the house they describe as, at this time, upstairs of our house was not finished. And I think that's maybe the same way that we can think about these children and their maturity in terms of their gender roles, is society hasn't imprinted upon them what their expectations are yet.
Same thing growing up. I did share a room with my sister many times. I don't know if it was a lot of times just because, though, we didn't have the room, like we were in a small house or small apartment. But I definitely know that as we became of age, it was more, ideal that, hey, we needed our own separate space because we were definitely not the same anymore in a lot of regards as a boy and a girl.
Right. And to me, these two kids were interesting because what were they afraid of? Right. There's that quote where they're talking about they weren't afraid of the outside. Right. They were afraid of what was inside the room. It's kind of like that lurking danger of what are we going to become, or what are the things that are going to be forced upon us in a sense.
And for here, when I kind of thought about that, of at a young age, we're all scared of everything, right? And we bond together to try to, have those numbers to protect each other. And I know that I've talked to my wife before that, if I'm not here, she's sometimes a little bit more scared than when I am. And I am rarely, I get scared when I'm by myself. I like being by myself. And I wonder if that is kind of those traditional, stereotypes put on of being a little bit more fearful or not. I mean, it's kind of a conversation,
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
And I would think that, when you look at this little girl, she had dreams, right, of being the hero, of saving buildings from fire. Like, she was active. She was participating in her fate, right? She was writing the own end of her own story, per se. And, moving on to the father. Okay, so that's the kids. The father was a fox pelter, right? A little on the nose if we're going to talk about surface versus interior values here, that the father is only dealing with the skin, like the fur of the animal. He throws away the insides, not paying attention to what's on the inside. In the same way, maybe he doesn't see the inside of his daughter.
As an Expedia member, you get a discount now, plus points.
Very good.
The outward appearance is the only thing that matters to him. What, the internal of an individual, no, that's not important. So yeah, that's kind of heartbreaking. And, it's, oh, that's dad, he's tough.
Yeah. Well, and then he had a role, right? Like, his job was to cage these foxes, to raise them to a specific purpose. And I don't know if we're supposed to just take that directly as like kind of like the kid metaphor, but they did have that line where they talk about each of them had a real door that a man could go through. And I think I would normally just gloss over this, but the fact that Alice Munro made sure not to call it a person or one, she called it man in a story that's very gender driven, it made me think that she might have been kind of evoking these feelings that only men can, open that door for people for how they behave, in a sense, almost like they're putting on the rules of society. It might be one way to interpret that line.
And the way I kind of interpret it was that the man is the provider and that the wife is the one that is delegated to the kitchen or delegated to the housework, because then in another instance in the story, the mom was like, oh, don't worry, you're going to have help, real help eventually when Laird becomes of age. And saying, I can't wait until my son is a man and he can go help his father, and my daughter is of age to help me in the house and do the housework. So they set that up, I think, very, very clearly.
It's so sad, right? Like to be told.
Okay, and then there's more to that. Obviously, there's still 6 more minutes. If you decide you want to do that particular one, you probably want to go back and listen to more of that too. But I want to hit the last one really quick before our time ends here, and that is the lesson. This is by TONI, CADE, BAMBARA, Notice that you can see my video here, that there are a lot of different things that you pop up here, including an audio book. So if you want to listen to it and not see it, which some of you prefer, there's also that option, right? Okay, so we're not going to listen to one of the longer ones, although I'd really like to. There's a couple of really good ones here. I'm going to choose one that's really quick. This is a lesson, summary, and analysis. Again, if you haven't read the short story, do so now before you listen, okay?
Meet Sylvia, the first-person narrator of Toni Cade Bambara's short story, The Lesson. Sylvia is around 10 years old and lives in Harlem in the 1960s. She's black and pretty angry, but doesn't quite understand why she's angry or of its connection to being black. But that's not to say she isn't intelligent. On the contrary, she's rather sharp, as shown throughout the story. In this lesson, discover what she learns during an important day in her life. To better understand the lesson, it might be helpful to know a little about the author. Toni Cade Bambara spent the first 10 years of her life in Harlem. She may have been a lot like Sylvia herself. She credits these years with having a profound effect on her writing. The descriptions of Harlem and the characters in the story are very realistic and vivid. The reader can imagine the smell of the city air, hear the traffic, and picture the characters. Bambara wrote several film scripts, 2 novels, and several collections of short stories. The lesson first appeared in the collection Gorilla My Love, 1972. Bambara died of colon cancer at the age of 56 in 1995. Some of her other published works are The Black Woman, an anthology, 1970. Tales and Stories for Black Folks, 1971. Sea Birds Are Still Alive, 1977. And The Salt Eaters, 1980. The lesson takes place on a seemingly ordinary day in Harlem, probably in the 1960s. Sylvia, the narrator, and a small group of neighborhood children visit an FAO Schwartz toy store in another part of the city. Miss Moore, an educated black woman who frequently takes the neighborhood children on educational outings, accompanies them. Sylvia makes it clear that she would much...
Okay, and that gives you just a real quick taste of where we can go with that, right? Okay, let's stop sharing just to end our last little bit here. If I can go back to where we are. Oh, I can't find you again, but does anyone who is here live have any questions? Okay, I will post all of these different links. And that will help us all through various different parts of this. And that's where we'll go. So I'm going to let this run out in case anybody has any last minute questions. And you guys have a fantastic week.